you've already got, even people that are new into leadership, they're not new into this world. So you've already got tools in your toolkit that will have transferable skills. So I think just remember where you've already been, because that's going to help you where you're going. But I think the more open you are to learning and the more open you are to exploring different ways of doing things, the quicker you will grow and evolve. So I think always be looking, always be listening, and always be curious.
Welcome to Sustainability Transformations podcast, where we explore bold ideas to drive positive change for people, community, and business. And today, I'm so pleased we have Zoe Thompson, who looks at the strength to lead from resilience, mindset, reinvention from the front line to the front row. And has transformed from a senior place leader to international strong woman and mindset coach. Her journey is actually a lesson in inner strength and meeting sustainable change. Thanks once again for joining us. Can you introduce yourself and your story, please?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So in a nutshell, I'm Zoe. I've been running my own business for nearly 8 years now. My career started with the police service here in the UK. I worked in total for 20 years with the local police force, but moved into leadership quite quickly. So out of the 20 years that I worked with them, 15 of those years were in leadership. In addition to that, I also competed within Strongwoman. So it's the one that everybody watches at Christmas here in the UK. But it escalated very, very quickly from sort of strength and conditioning in the gym to that sort of higher competition level. And within my business, I help people find what I call aligned success. So I think success can look very different for different people. What I help people is to align being successful, being ambitious, being high performers, but in a way that feels right for them. So not at the sacrifice of their well-being, not compromising the things that are really important to them. So that helps with that longevity and sustainability of things are in alignment for them. So they can be ambitious, they can be successful, but they can also be healthy and a present parent and partner and all of the other things that are important in life. So that's what I'd support them to do through coaching and through community. And I also work with organizations supporting leadership development as well. So lots going on. I like variety.
Oh, that's good. So we know where your leadership started from and the shift, but what really sparked that shift into the coaching and entrepreneurship and leadership? Was there any particular moment that sparked that shift?
Well, in the reason for me leaving the police force was through redundancy. So I think had that not come about, I probably would have stayed there a little bit longer. Although I did have aspirations to go into coaching eventually, I think they brought the timeline forward a lot quicker. In the last roles that I had with the police, I was their business change manager. So I had a contracted role as in business change. So my role was to be the go-between between the project and program teams and the people within the business. So lots of stakeholder engagement, lots of communication. But I also had a secondary role as a self-development trainer. And because I was in senior leadership, I was coaching and mentoring others that were coming up through. So when the redundancy came in, or when I was told about the redundancy coming in, I had the option of going and working somewhere else. I'd never worked really for anybody else before, or to bring all of the things that I enjoyed doing most while I was in the police, of bringing that together and creating a business. So I decided at that time that creating a business was the easier option. I think with the benefit of hindsight, perhaps not, but I think a little bit of naivety in that point worked to my advantage because I didn't know really what was involved in terms of running a business. But certainly no regrets. I absolutely love what I do, and I don't think I would be employable now. I think I've worked on my own for too long.
That's a great insight. From crisis to confidence, you lost 6 stone and became a strong woman, competitor. What did that transformation teach you about belief or self-belief, discipline, and being able to sustain that change?
Taught me so much, and it taught me lots, in not just in that environment, lots of the lessons learned transferred into life in general, both my personal and professional life. So in my sort of 20s and 30s, I was hugely overweight. I wasn't healthy at all. Lots of different circumstances had led to that. But once I made the decision that I wanted to make some changes, so I started off giving up smoking, then started running, then joined the gym. And through the gym was where I met my personal trainer. And my personal trainer was sort of talking to me about the benefits of strength training, especially for women. So back then it wasn't as popular as it is now. I think we're seeing a lot more women in the weight section, which is good. But back then, actually, we're talking over 10 years ago now. So sort of 15 years ago, we still had women's sections and women only gyms. So that really introduced me into this whole different world, really. I started working with the PT, and I loved the challenge of strength training. I liked how it shifted, not being about the aesthetics, not being about how I looked, but being about what I could do. And it really challenged me in terms of self-belief. I think with lifting, with strength training, and in particular competing, you have to believe that you're capable of moving that weight. And if you've got that mental barrier there, then it doesn't matter how strong you are. You have to have the two connected. And that for me taught me a lot around, I think, having somebody in your corner who sees your potential before you see it. I mean, my PT would put weight on the bar. He wouldn't tell me what weight was on there. He would just tell me how many times to lift it and put it back down again. And I think that for me really started to challenge my way of thinking of, well, I think I'm capable of this much, but at the same time, I've got this person here that thinks that I'm capable of so much more. And once I started to challenge myself with that in other areas as well, like, okay, well, I think I can do this much. What else do I think I could do if I really pushed it? So I think with strength training, a lot of it is around discipline. It's the consistency around discipline. You have to show up for yourself. Like, you have to really tap into that want to be there. It's not something that you can just kind of show up and just do, especially once you're competing. You have to follow the plan, you have to be disciplined, you have to be consistent. But also because of risk of injury, and I was still working full time at that point, it has to be a sustainable plan. You have to have a safe plan to follow to help you to get stronger, but not at the risk of injury and not at the risk of completely tiring out your central nervous system that you then can't function and parent and hold down a job at the same time. There was lots that I learned around the planning and the preparation and the discipline and consistency, and lots of things that I do now with my clients in terms of that intent, being very intentional, being very purposeful, that identity that we evolve into when we take on new challenges, but the planning and the structure as well. So we need to have the plans in place, but we also need to have that structure in place to support the plan. That means that we are able to do all of the things that we've set out to do. So I learned a lot in that time period around, and certainly a lot of the tools I still use now, not necessarily in a gym environment, but with clients, helping them to plan and for them to reach that higher performance and have that structure in place that finds that balance for the aligned success that I was talking about earlier.
That personal experience ties into the next segment of exploring the leadership beyond the badge of those 20 years or so of in the place. How did that teach you about juggling, managing pressure, performance, and people?
But I mean, if you're going to work in, if you talk about working in a high pressure environment, there's nothing like the emergency services to meet that challenge. And a lot of the roles that I did were operational as well. So they were public facing. So you could plan your day to a certain extent, but the public always have different ideas as to what you're going to be doing that day. So I think in terms of contingency, that was a big part for me. You really needed to plan. You really needed to be clear on what you needed to be done. So prioritization, time management, really, really important, but also having enough contingency in place, and especially some leeway between when you need to complete the task and when the deadline is, because you could come into work and have your day mapped out, and then there would be a major incident or a critical incident and everything stops for you to focus on that. So certainly that in terms of my planning skills, time management, prioritization, all become really important. In terms of leadership, you've got what I call the project leadership and the people leadership. So project leadership in terms of making sure tasks are delivered on time and at that high level. And then also the people leadership of bringing out the best of the people, helping people to see their full potential and be able to perform in a way that works for them. And I think, I would have, when I got to a senior level, it was a department of 120 that I was partly responsible for as part of the senior leadership team. But as a team leader, I would still have teams of 20. And then from an operational perspective, would be responsible for a room of 60 to 100 people on duty. So you need to understand that people all need something very different. They all need you to show up as a leader in a very different way to get the best out of them. So I learned to flex and adapt that communication style and how I spoke with people, how I heard people, how I delivered those messages. And I think that led really from my early days in the place of dealing with the public. You learn to deal with different people need a different response. They need you to show up differently, and leadership is the same. Understanding what makes them tick, what's important to them, what do they value, how do they like to communicate. All of that really helped me to learn to be even more flexible in terms of my approach to get the best out of the people on my team. Some people liked it very clear, very direct, very short, sharp instructions, and other people needed a little bit more of a softer approach and more of a nurturing type of leadership style, and other people liked it more sort of transactional. I'm here to do a job, I'm here to get it done, just tell me what I need to do and I'll go and get on with it. So within a team of 10 or 20, I think having that team leadership, you get to know people, that helps build that leadership style. And then also just being able to work in a fast-paced environment that actually the ability to be able to give very clear instructions, make decisions very quickly, but also reassess those decisions when more information comes through. So I think from a leadership perspective, I don't think I could have been given a better environment to learn to develop and harness those skills. And all of it has been transferable into the work that I've done since. So I'm very grateful for all of those experiences and all of the people that I got to work with along the way, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's good. Exploring still within that leadership space, I'm curious to know if are there any factors or self-limiting behaviors that it could hold back leaders from being that flexible in terms of those changes, being adaptable, or is something which it comes second nature? Is it the nature of how business delivery works? I'm curious to know if there are any pain points, any tendencies that could prevent leaders from being more adaptable and being more flexible, as you discussed.
Leaders are humans, aren't they? So we've all got those traits and characteristics that can be a real positive in one area and be unhelpful in another. And I think that's what we see with people in leadership. And I would argue that leadership is a learned skill. It's a set of learned behaviors. And I think we, as leaders, I think most people who step into leadership recognize that they've got a lot of those core skills already. But actually, I think the best leaders are the ones who step into the role knowing that they've got the core skills in place, but really wanting to learn and develop the other skills as well. And I think the best leaders are the ones that have got that self-awareness, I think in two ways. Firstly, to recognize that we're not always going to be the person who knows and who has the answers, and recognizing and respecting that people within our team can do things better than we can, and that's okay. They will have their own skills, their own strengths. I had this conversation with somebody on LinkedIn this morning. We recruit and we promote people based on what they can bring to the table, but if we don't then allow them a seat at the table, or we don't allow them to speak at the table, or we don't listen when we're at the table, it defeats the whole object of bringing those people in. And I think as leaders, that awareness that we don't have all of the answers and we're not always going to know what's best, but also we need to hear from everybody who's sitting around the table to be able to really build that team. And our job is to lead and guide. It's not to have all of the answers. Our role is to lead and guide those that do. And I think that's what makes a really good leader, is firstly recognizing that other people have those skills and those strengths, and not allowing our ego to get in the way of always being the person who's speaking and always being the person who's making those decisions, and giving that space for other people around the table to speak and to be heard.
That's good. I can't remember who exactly mentioned it. So, I wouldn't mention their name, but it's very popular among the highly successful business leaders that we know around the world, where they are comfortable with hiring smart people around them. And whether or not the business leaders make the final decisions, then that's fine. But they are comfortable. I think the key phrase is they are comfortable with bringing in smart people around them. And there was another leader who mentioned that once he knows more than the people he or she has hired, it's time to fire them. So
Yeah, I heard somebody say once, it was the leader of an organization called Stonewall, and they were saying that if you've got a room full of people, as a senior leader, if you've got a room full of people that either agree with everything that you say, well, if you've got a room of people that agree with everything you say, you've got a problem, because either you haven't created a safe space where they feel comfortable and confident to speak up and disagree with you, or you've recruited little mini versions of you that you're paying less. So I thought that was such a great takeaway for me. I mean, it was a whole hour speech, but that was the one thing that really resonated with me. And I went back, I remember going back into work the next day and having a conversation, bringing my team around the table and saying, right, challenge. I want more challenge. I want to hear your different perspectives. I want to hear your different opinions. And when we're around the table, I want everybody to share what their perspective is, because that's how we're all going to learn. And I want to create that space where you feel confident enough to say, actually, Zoe, I don't agree with that, and challenge and throw something else into the mix, because that's how we're going to move things forward. And I think it's such a great reminder to all of us that we need challenge. We learn from challenge, and our teams will reach that higher performance through challenge. But also, for, if we go back to the sustainability element, we want to keep people. We know it's expensive. People are our biggest investment. We want to keep them. We don't want a high staff turnover. So we want to be able for our people to grow within the spaces that they're in. And when they outgrow those spaces, we find a new space for them to move into, and I think that that's a really important part of it.
from sustainability, one of the models of explaining why people are so important, you have the 5 capitals model, where you have the financial capital, which is the money aspect, the revenue or the funding if they are a public body, the manufactured capital, so it can be the buildings. You have the human capital, which is the ingenuity, the intelligence. You have the social capital, how connected they are. They can work as a team. So you can bring a number of intelligent or capable, in whichever the metrics are, 5 to 20 people. But if there is no cohesion and there is too much friction, no matter how capable or performing they are, they just cannot function. So again, I'm teasing out some of these things, perhaps for some listeners to know why it is important to have strong team, and those leadership discussions you talk about how important people, which in sustainability, you may have some leaders or employees that care so much about the environment. So, for example, if I was to try and pitch a business leader or an employee to change their behavior in the lighting or energy use, for some employees, I can talk about how much money is being saved and the same energy, but I'm talking about the cost savings, and it may motivate them. The same lighting or energy, I can talk about how much less greenhouse gas emissions, which can affect their air quality and health. If I talk about the health for some employees or people or leaders, that will motivate them. It's still the same energy, but I have picked about different aspects, or some showing about how much we care about the environment, and that's why we're doing it. It's still the same. It still hasn't changed. It's like the coin, where it's both the head and the tail. It's still the same coin. All the edges, different speaker mentioned about the edges as well. It's still the same coin, but I have picked different aspects, and I thought I will highlight how important, from what you said, how to communicate with different people and how they feel and what motivates them. And yeah, so this really highlights how important the key ideas you've shared
It's a
benefit
really good
us as
model to
sustainability.
use as a framework. So yeah, it's really important.
How within uh, companies, only sustainability is a general challenge. There was a LinkedIn study which was released early this year, 2025, which talks about burnout and performance and how managers, advisors, and leaders are crying out for more training or support. So I'm curious to tease out a bit more around the performance aspect of leaders. Where are some of the lessons that companies can learn, explore about improving those aspects of delivering performance for whether new managers or leaders? I'm conscious I'm probably interchanging those words between managers and leaders, so you can help perhaps unpack that. So yeah, but I'm curious to know how the performance can be improved based on these early signs of burnout and other key challenges around performance.
I think the middle managers are the ones we need to put the most investment in because they have the biggest impact in terms of circle of influence. They have the biggest impact. Burnout is an interesting one. I've done lots of talks around burnout, managing stress and overwhelm. I think people often their go-to response around burnout is a mismatch of resources. So not enough people, not enough time, not enough resources. Whereas actually what I'm seeing, and I think what the research is now starting to show, is that the mismatch of values is just a big cause, just as big. And actually that's something that as managers and as leaders, we have some influence over. So if there's a mismatch of values, we can speak to individuals to find out what's important, like exactly as you've just been describing, how we can make a few changes that would make a big difference. So, within burnout, we've got all of these different influences. So we've got the mismatch of resources, we've got mismatch of values, we've got mismatch of energy and reward, mismatch of community and that sense of belonging, which we're seeing more with the hybrid working and remote working, of how do we recreate that sense of community and belonging for everybody, and also doing that in a way that's inclusive to everybody. So I think there's all of these things going on, and so much of it can be influenced by those middle managers, the team leaders, those middle management. Unfortunately, what we do see is that when there are budget constraints, that's often the first thing to go, is the leadership support and development. And I think people do know that. I think that's always the challenge, though, isn't there? When there's less budget and there's less to spend, the training and development is often the one to go. But the stronger the leader, the better the team, the higher the performance, the bigger the output. So I think from my perspective, and I appreciate I'm slightly biased because I work in this world, but I would have told you this if you'd asked me this question when I was in leadership. We need to invest in our leadership development. When we invest in a leader, we're investing in everybody that they have responsibility for, because it cascades and it impacts and it influences. So I think that for me, I don't know if that answers your question directly, but I think in terms of the challenge with burnout and with stress and reducing that and creating a high performance environment, that investment in your leader and the leadership skills, the leadership behaviors, and not creating leaders, but recruiting leaders that have values that align with the company will create the culture that you're looking for. And I think there's lots of things that can be done differently that would have a more positive impact, not necessarily through budget. I think just changing some of the recruitment questions to make sure you're bringing people in that align with what you're looking for from your company will help to shape the culture. That doesn't cost anything more. You're just changing some of the questions in your recruitment process. But I think investing in leaders has a bigger impact than I think more people realize.
You answered the question. If there was any takeaway from this discussion, is the values that you mentioned. And I say that perhaps share why I'm excited about the topic. So I discovered in sustainability training, it wasn't effective. And I knew that it wasn't effective because a lot of the training is on what people have to do. So people go on courses, what they have to do. They weren't thought about how to do it. And I got that feedback from over 100 online students who have come back to some training which I've done, and over 200 that I've trained. So I've been on that quest to find, okay, so what's the link between this is what you have to do and how to do it? What's the link? And I've discovered is that learning and development, and the crux of the matter is that value. And so, yeah, you've answered the question, and perhaps we can explore more on that later. But curious to know the learning and development, you mentioned where there is a budget constraint. This is a difficult question, so I'll give the background to it. Is it because the training and the learning and development get cut quickly because perhaps the leadership team are not seeing the value in it compared to others where it's less visible. I'm not finding excuses for them, but I'm very curious to know why, perhaps a step deeper. So I always find companies can reduce their energy consumption. Not all companies, medium to large companies can reduce energy consumption, which can save them, let's say, £200,000 or £500,000. I get it's a personal thing. I get a bit concerned where that is overlooked because you can see the energy in the building, but they'll let people go because you can see.
And I think from my experience, it's often because it's seen as a back office function. I think especially where you've got, I can only really speak for public sector because that's where my experience lies. And I think with public sector, you've got your operational frontline roles and then you've got your back office support functions. And certainly within public sector, there are mandated levels around operational functions. So there's only so much you can do in those kind of frontline operational roles. So I think back office is always the first one to get hit. I think that's probably the same with any company, whether that's public or private sector. But I think also, you'll have your mandated training. So training where it's new systems or new procedures, new legislation that has to be rolled out and has to be rolled out quite quickly. I think leadership almost has that delayed results and it doesn't always have that immediate impact. So I think sometimes it's seen as something that can be delayed or put on the back burner, and because there's not always that immediate return on that investment. Although I would argue that actually investing in your people in terms of keeping hold of people, getting the best out of people has a huge return on the investment, but I think it's not so easy to measure. So I think I don't want to say it's easy because I don't think any of this is an easy decision to come to. But I think when you put it into that hierarchy of where the money goes and where you get the quickest return on the investment, or where you've got perhaps government mandated training or government mandated structures, organizational structures in place, it's one that's probably an easier one to tackle.
Yeah.
I don't think for 1 minute anybody wants to do it, but then I think that's just one of those things with budget cuts, isn't it? It's like redundancies. I don't think anybody wants to make redundancies. Nobody wants to have to do any of these things. Unfortunately, it's just when the money is less, the cuts have to be made. So yeah, I think it's a difficult one. I think it is a difficult. I think it's because I do think it's because it's something that people feel could be put on the back burner without there being a significant impact. But actually, we know that impact does come. It's just further down the line.
Thanks for sharing that. So how do you typically help clients build confidence, which can be sustained, but not just some situational or momentary?
So I work with people, I guess the best way to describe it is above the surface and below the surface. So there's the mindset work, the beliefs work, rewiring the subconscious, but also the above the surface work, which is like the strategy and the frameworks and the methods that people can use to hold that in place. So when it comes to confidence, for me, it's not about the fake it till you make it. It's not about teaching them what confident body language looks like. I think that has its place. That's the above the surface. But I think under the surface, it's challenging the beliefs that are holding them back. It's reinforcing the beliefs that are going to liberate them or launch them forward, and really working on the subconscious, because when it's a true inner belief, then it's a belief and it's a feeling that's going to come through in your body language, in your tone, in your pace, how you show up, what you show up to, how much you step out of your comfort zone. Whereas when it's above the surface, that takes willpower because it's an action, it's a behavior rather than that inner belief. So for me, the priority and the focus is on working under the surface, but also giving some strategies and some frameworks to help them really kind of put that structure in place to support the subconscious rewiring.
If you have a sustainability leader or a CEO who is passionate about sustainability, but perhaps is not getting the buy-in that they want and not getting that buy-in over time. The teams are working in silos. It's difficult to convince the various team leaders how they can support the agenda. And over time, their confidence starts to erode. Perhaps, when they started, they were very confident. So what would be your advice in such a leader, how they can get back into their initial confidence, because the environment, they've been knocked so much that it's knocked off their confidence. So I'm curious to know how, you could help such a sustainability leader if they were in your session, for example.
So my approach to that would be to explore the confirmation bias. So our brains see what we tell it to look for. And what quite often happens with a knock of confidence is something will happen. And so we start to question our own ability, or our ability may have been questioned by somebody else. And so what it does is that it puts that question onto our radar. And then what our brain wants to do then is confirm what we've started to believe is true. So it will start to evidence gather for us. So our brains see what we tell it to look for. So often when confidence has been knocked, we are looking for things to confirm that we're rubbish and that we're not good at it anymore and that we've lost our confidence. So the challenge around that is to question what you've been looking for and start to decide, what is it you want your brain to see? Because if we can shift that around and we can work out, what did we believe was true before any of this happened, and what do we want to believe is true moving forward, we can then train our brains to go out and look for the evidence that that is true, and that will then help to shift that. So whether it's conscious or unconscious, we're always looking to confirm our own narrative. So sometimes we have to really question what our narrative is and whether or not it's helping us or whether it's holding us back. So that's where I would start, is to look at what they've been looking for and what do they need to be looking for instead.
What would be your final parting message to leaders who are listening? Your final thoughts you would give, or aspiring, leaders, the high potential leaders as well?
Well, it's a good question to ask. I think be really confident in your existing competence. You've already got, nobody, even people that are new into leadership, they're not new into this world. So you've already got tools in your toolkit that will have transferable skills. So I think just remember where you've already been, because that's going to help you where you're going. But I think the more open you are to learning and the more open you are to exploring different ways of doing things, the quicker you will grow and evolve. So I think always be looking, always be listening, and always be curious.
Huge thank you to Zoe Thompson for blessing us with your time and the incredible insights. Very pleased with the journey as you've shared, but also the great insight around the leadership, the performance, the culture, and the pressure, and a whole lot more. So where listeners want to find more of your work or contact you, where can they find you, please?
So if you head to the website, which is zoethompson.uk, you'll find some free resources there, ways to contact me, and links to all the socials as well. So yeah, more than happy to hear from people.
You should be able to find those links as well in the description to contact Zoe directly. So yeah, thanks once again.
Thank you for having me.